Yeah, Series 7 is rough. Whew, boy. There's some real clunkers. There's a lot of mediocrity. And even the best episodes of this series, you put them up against the best episodes from any other series, and they don't even come close. So, Series 7 is a rough go. But I finished my revisit. I need to rank these suckers. Let's go. Now, there are no two-parters in this one, and I'm going to do something I don't normally do. I'm counting the Christmas special because it comes in the middle of the series and is part of the series arc. So normally I don't include Christmas specials when I do these rankings. I'm going to make an exception with Series 7. So I've got 14 of these to do. Let's get started. Number 14, Journey to the Center of the TARDIS. What a great title. What a great idea. What a lack of a need for monsters. What a lack for a need of a stupid, pointless twist on some guy we don't know turning out to not actually be an android, which, why do we care? Oh, and let's have a reset button so none of this matters anyways. And honestly, I feel like the reset button is the least of this thing's problems because it was almost like a meta commentary on how the Doctor kind of fixes things, so I can almost applaud at that, but man, from a starting interesting premise of exploring the interior of the TARDIS while it's all breaking down, it just falls apart hard. Number 13, A Nightmare in Silver. Neil Gaiman writing the Cybermen. This should have been great, and it just isn't. It is a combination of ideas that feel like they needed another pass, and some performance or directing decisions that just don't help. The inclusion of the kids, Angie and Artie, they shouldn't be there. They contribute absolutely nothing, and Angie especially is an infuriating character. Every time she speaks, I can't stand her. So they drag this whole thing down. The whole thing of Mr. Clever and this cybernetic version of the Doctor fighting with the actual Doctor for control should be really cool and compelling, but it's not. Partially because there isn't very much to differentiate the performance from Matt Smith between one and the other. And it's just one is the Doctor slightly angled down so he looks more evil with blinky bits on his face. But he's the same guy. Because we've seen Matt Smith's Doctor go dark and feel dangerous. And this Mr. Clever just feels like that. I'm like, you don't feel like a different character because we've seen these as aspects, elements of the Doctor. So that doesn't work. The Cybermen like the idea of if there's even one, if we can't kill it, we have to blow up the planet. I mean, that's cool to say, I guess, but they're not demonstrably that much more interesting than we've ever seen them up to this point. It's got Warwick Davis. I mean, that's nice. That's about all I got, though. Number 12, The Rings of Akaten. Here's what I would say. I find this one somewhat just bland. Uninteresting. Even the big key moment, which is the big speech from the Doctor, doesn't really work because the sound mixing is completely buggered. And do people mind when I use British slang? I usually throw that in as a way to not swear. Because that's what I wanted to say. But it is. You can barely make out what he's saying. So even the supposed best moment is completely screwed up. And everything else up to that point is just, you can't get invested in it. It meanders around. It doesn't seem to know what point it's trying to make. And it seems to be trying to sell Clara, but it's just selling the idea of infinite possibility. That doesn't sell her as a character. So it fails in what it sets out to do, and it's not even that interesting to watch. Number 11. I think we're out of the really bad stuff, and now we start getting into the mediocrity, and that is A Town Called Mercy. I want to like this one more. I really do. I like Ben Browder a lot. I love Farscape. I like the design on the cyborg. I'm okay with the setting overall. It just doesn't click. It's just kind of there and like, okay. So that was a thing we did. Cool. It's a kind of a nothing of an episode. It leaves very little impression behind after you watch it. Moving up one spot to number 10, The Crimson Horror. This is one, and I went into detail on this in my review, but this is one where one change, and this could have been good. Unfortunately, it just comes in as slightly undercooked. There's, at least versus some of the other stuff, there's more decent elements at play. There's the Pater Noster gang, who I enjoy. There are some good, strong performances from the guest cast. We've got Diana Rigg. How bad can it be? And it's fine, but it could and should have been more. But it reintroduces the Doctor too early. From a starting premise of, we don't know where the Doctor is, but something is going on and we know he's somehow involved. It should have taken longer for him to come back, so it could have been a triumphant moment. But he comes back about halfway through, and then it's just like, oh, okay, so business as usual from here on then. Number 9, The Snowmen. I'll give this one credit. I think better of it than I did before this rewatch. I think there's more to it than I was giving it credit for before. The Doctor himself, Matt Smith, gives a solid performance in this one. This is honestly my favorite iteration of Clara, at the very least through Series 7. My favorite iteration of Clara that we get initially. And I like the setting. I think it's fun. I like some of the whimsy in it. But once we introduce the ice governess, things kind of spiral a little bit, and it doesn't quite pull together again after that. And it's one of the better Christmas specials, but if you know how little regard I hold the Christmas specials in, you'll realize that's not really a compliment coming from me. Number 8, The Bells of St. John. Strong performance from Matt Smith. Very cool return of Richard E. Grant as the Great Intelligence. Some neat ideas in terms of hacking people, adjusting personality traits, but the Spoonheads, the killer Wi-Fi, this version of Clara, none of that quite lands. It's not awful, and I remember liking it quite a bit at the time, but I think I was just really happy to have more Doctor Who back, and Matt Smith is still doing great in the part, but it's trying to do too much, and some of the things that it's doing don't completely work. And as a result, it's just kind of fine. Number 7, The Power of 3. I think people are down on this episode more than it deserves. This doesn't come apart until about the last 5 minutes. And honestly, up to that point, I think it's really clever. I like what it does. I like what it does to build towards the exit of Amy and Rory. I like the idea of this slow invasion where the Doctor is forced to come to Earth and stay put for a while. And he hates it. We get more of Brian, Rory's dad, and that's nice. There's a lot of good stuff here up until we get to the conclusion, which is rushed and doesn't feel like a proper payoff to anything and just doesn't work. So, honestly, up until about the last 7 minutes, this thing's pretty solid, and I think deserves a bit more credit than people give it. Number 6, Cold War. It's a pretty solid reintroduction of the Ice Warriors. That's kind of about all I got. It's once you know the premise, it does pretty much exactly what you'd think it would do, but it's buoyed by a couple of neat ideas, such as the Ice Warrior coming out of its armor, and some good performances from people like David Warner and Liam Cunningham. So, that helps boost it a little, but the material overall is just so bland. Well, no, bland is overly harsh. It's not bland, it's workmanlike. It fills the space. It gets the job done, but there's nothing particularly memorable about this one, which is unfortunate because, like I said, there's some decent component pieces. Nothing is really there to really hit you and really give you a reason to remember this one. As a result, I tend to forget what series this happens in unless I really think about it. Number 5, dinosaurs on a spaceship. I probably put this one a lot higher than most people would, but I just find it fun. It's called Dinosaurs on a Spaceship. It is fun. I love the bickering robots. That's so Douglas Adams. I love that to death. We get Rory's dad, which normally not something I care for, but he's just so lovable. I enjoy him quite a bit. And, the Doctor's excitement. I like the assembling of sort of this ragtag team with this big game hunter and Nefertiti. I'm like, why not? It's a bit of a throw caution to the wind, let's just have a good time adventure that is just fun and enjoyable until it decides to get, weirdly dark at the end. And I'm not saying the Doctor can't be dark, but for the turn that it takes versus the tone of the episode up to that point, that doesn't quite work. But up until then, I find this one quite fun. Number 4, Angels Take Manhattan. Logistical problems out the butt with this. There's a lot of things that don't really make sense. Although, people keep bringing up in the comments the idea of why couldn't the Doctor ever go back? And why have we seen the Doctor in New York in other instances? It wasn't just New York. It was that specific time bit of New York. Because that was what was all screwed up. So, he could still show up earlier like he did with Martha to an earlier point in the timeline in New York City. And plus, it's reiterated within the same episode. Once he has seen their graves, he knows when they die. Could he feasibly have gone back and visited them? Maybe, but he couldn't take them out because he already knows they're going to live their lives and die. So it's the recursive loop that's already in there. So that's not a logistical problem. I just had to get that off my chest. But there are plenty of others, though, that don't quite make sense. The Statue of Liberty being the big one. Literally and figuratively. Holy cow. But the emotion in this one is what rings true. The performances from Arthur Darvill and Karen Gillan are really, really strong. I mean, they've been strong throughout. They've been great together, and they're really good here, and they sell that loss. And Karen Gillan, especially in her goodbye to the Doctor, really good. Alex Kingston does great work as River Song in this one. It's the performances and the emotionality that is injected into what is happening that elevates this. And it does a lot to bring it up and help paper over the fact that significant parts of it don't make any dang sense. Number 3. Probably the only person on the planet who's going to put this one so high. Although, I hear a lot of people don't like my number 2 that much either. Anyways, this is a weird series. You got to give me some leeway on it, on this ranking. Number 3 is Hyde. I just enjoy this. I like the 1970s, sort of paranormal investigation thing that they've got going on. I like the vibe of the ghost story feel to it. I think the solution is kind of neat and clever. I think there's a lot of good atmosphere in it. It's bizarre and doesn't necessarily fit the story otherwise, but I do actually really like the idea of this horrifying, scary monster that the Doctor's been terrified of is just trying to get back to its mate. I just like that. It's as simple as that. I just like it. Number 2, Asylum of the Daleks. A lot of people seem to not like this one. Like a lot. I enjoy this one. I think the pace is nice. I think it's got a fun adventure vibe to it for a lot of it. I honestly am completely support the characterization and the handling of Amy and Rory's relationship. I understand the complaints, so you don't have to put them in the comments. I've heard them and I understand them. I just don't share them. For me, it works. And I honestly really enjoy this episode. Some people take a really deep dislike to this one. And I don't know how much of that was the marketing at the time and really building up the idea of all these Daleks from all these eras when it's not really about that. They're just in the background. But as a story unto itself, I enjoy this. I think it's fun. I think it deals with its emotional core well. I like this version of Clara better than the one that we were stuck with. Not quite as much as Governess Clara, but I do like her. I think the twist is, in hindsight, it's obvious, but I think it's pretty well handled. It's pretty clever. I just enjoy this one. And number 1, Name of the Doctor. I really should have a lot more praising to say about the number 1 than I do, but I said, this isn't a great series, and it's not. But Name of the Doctor is a solid finale, and wow, that cliffhanger at the end. Holy cow. Like, what a crazy reveal. What a what? And also, I do really enjoy what is going on with the Great Intelligence. I like the idea that he is just so fed up with the Doctor beating him at every turn that he's willing to die just to screw with the Doctor. I like that. I dig it. We got the Paternoster gang back. And I always enjoy them. They're not actually in all that many good stories, but I do enjoy them. And they're fun. We get River, and we get some nice closure between her and Matt Smith's Doctor. That works really well. I do think this is a really solid wrap-up for a very deeply uneven season. So that's Series 7. You rewatched it lately? What do you think about it? Whatever your thoughts are, drop something on down in the comments. Let's talk about it. Usual stuff to do. Like, subscribe, share this around. Check out my Patreon. You know all the stuff. But you also don't have to do any of it, because at the end of the day, you're the council. I'm just running the meetings. Until next time, this council is adjourned.